So thank you. Now I'm going to show you some modeling results about what could be the integration between these two regions. So first, we are not looking at a very realistic scenario because we are looking at a full FTA from Pakistan to Brazil between the two regions without exception in terms of products. And we know that in many cases, in bilateral agreement, preferential agreement, we are going to see some sensitive products, some tariff rate quota and so on that will limit the effect of the trade liberalization. So here we want more to focus on kind of potential trade creation. We are going to look at this implementation between 2010 and 2015, and we will look at the consequences in 2020. Why? Because when you make this kind of trade policy reform, investment and the capital market will need time to adjust, so we need to look at the results some years after the end of the implementation period. We are not going to look at liberalization in services in the results. The main tool we use is the Mirage CZ model, that is a dynamic multi-sectoral model. Our main source of data is GTAP7, and we complement it with protection data of MacMap SX6. We are going to look at some technical innovation in terms of methodology. One is how you aggregate tariffs, because as you may know, we are working with CZ models that are, in average, aggregated with 20, 30, 40 sectors. When if you look at a trade nomenclature, you will find 5,000 products at the 6-digit level, and even 10,000 at the tariff line level. And as it has been pointed out by Antoine just before, we see a huge dispersion in some countries among products, where tariff can go from 0% to 200, 300, even 600% in some cases. So traditionally, people were making a trade-weighted average, but when you look at a trade-weighted average, first, there is no theory that justifies this choice in terms of welfare or trade effect, but also you will lose all the gains coming from trade liberalization in terms of reduction of tariff dispersion. Because what really matters in terms of economic efficiency is the distortion you have in relative prices across product, and just looking at the average, you are going to lose a part of information of what's happened inside the sector. So here we implement the consistent tariff aggregator that is inspired in terms of theory by Anderson 2009, and that I've implemented in Mirage in 2008, and in a paper with Will Martin and Dominique van der Meersbrugge, we implemented to look at the Doha round effect. And basically, it started to change results. We have larger numbers. Then for FDI, so we have larger numbers because we better capture these efficiency gains. For FDI, so we use a database that is compatible with GTAP7 that have been developed in 2006, 2007 in CEPI, so when I was at CEPI with some of my colleagues. But in terms of modeling, we have changed the Mirage model that initially just look at a kind of portfolio strategy where a household want to allocate their savings across sector and across the world to the most profitable situation. And in this model, in this variant of Mirage, we have different decisions for the firms and for households. And in particular, a firm will always try to reinvest a part of its profits in his own sector. And basically, the question is where to locate my investment, physically, geographically for a firm, when for the household it's still a kind of portfolio decision, in which sector and in which country. So it will, in terms of dynamic, introduce more realistic behavior. Now, of course, when you start to have a FTA, you can have more market opportunities, economic growth, and it will stimulate FDI. But we know that what can really stimulate FDI is when you, in addition to the FTA on goods, you are going to implement a bilateral investment treaty or specific thing that will basically improve the trust of investors and will shift their preferences. So we have a look at this, and in some scenario I'm going to show you the consequences. But of course, here you can think what will be the dilution effect, because today we already have some bilateral investment treaty. So we already create some links between Singapore and Chile. And if tomorrow you will have a broader FTA with a bilateral investment treaty among everyone, now you are going to have some substitution because Singapore investor will find the same security in Brazil tomorrow than they find today in Chile. So you see some countries are going to gain, some countries are going to lose compared to the current situation. We can also look at the link between trade, NDI, and trade costs in particular, because when you start to create, to have FDI, you reinforce business network and information sharing. Companies know where to find inputs, outputs in both regions, and so basically it reinforces the links. But in the model also we are going to capture some other effects, like the end of the tariff dumping arguments. If today you want to invest in Brazil to benefit from the entry in the Mercosur market, if tomorrow you have a FTA between Asia and Latin America, you can directly export goods from Asia to South America. So some effect will be pro-FDI, and other can be reduced FDI. And we hope that the model will help us to look at this. So I'm going to start to work a little on result now. First kind of result we'll like to look at in terms of economics is a broad aggregate, the change in real income. Here I have plotted 4 different modeling of the same scenario. So we have this large FTA first from Pakistan to Brazil, including Japan, including the rich economies in Asia, with the basic model. And as you are going to see, in general, we have more, and you will find more limited results. This is standard modeling. And you have even some losses coming from this agreement. Now, if you say still we have the large FTA, we are not looking at FDI, but we look at this consistent aggregator, how we better capture tariff heterogeneity. Gains increase. They increase except for one country, as you can see, Chile. For 2 reasons. First, Chile has no tariff heterogeneity among products, or very small. You know, there is only 2 products. So modeling this does not bring gains to Chile, but in the global model, so it reduces relative gains, and here the absolute gains of Chile. And in addition, with this kind of modeling, we also reinforce the competition at the 6-digit level. So Chile, that already has some agreements with ASEAN countries, will suffer more in this modeling from preference erosion. So we have this effect for Chile, but other countries will gain, basically. When you start to add FDI in the 3rd point, you have, in some cases, some little gain, like in Argentina. No change for Brazil. And because the direct effect of the FTA are not very strong. They were going to be strong when you had these bilateral investment treaties. And here you see that for Argentina and Brazil, we start to find gain in terms of GDP above 1% by 2020 annually. And in terms of effect of trade reform, it's quite significant as figure. Of course, other countries in the world are going to be negatively affected by this integration. The magnitude in terms of percentage point of real income is relatively low. We are speaking about 0.05 for Australia and New Zealand, for Africa, for different reasons in terms of increase in food prices and these kind of things. So we still think that in order to have this movement to be accepted by other countries and will continue, outcome of the Doha round to limit this kind of diversion effect are needed. What if we decide to compare a FTA where we include Japan and South Korea, where we say, okay, let's build only a developing country block. And of course, the gains are going to be strongly reduced. And in some case, for Central America, we are going to see losses. So the participation of these rich countries are going to be important. But also one of the key issues will be what they will give in terms of agricultural liberalization. Because most of the gain will come from agricultural liberalization, and you know that South Korea and Japan are highly protected. So what kind of concession they can make? But another gain from their presence is their capacity to bring foreign investment in the region. Because when we have the FTA here, we combine it with the bilateral investment treaty, and we know that these countries have high capacity in terms of FDI. So, of course, they will give market access in agriculture, but another gain from their participation is in FDI. Okay, I have no more time, so I will jump exports. Two last remarks. One on what is the effects on poverty reduction and inequalities. No, a little too quick. On the left, you have the average unskilled real wages. And we are going to see more or strong increase, up to 2.5% in Central America. But, of course, it means that in Latin America, in primary sectors, agriculture and mining, unskilled workers are going to gain more. But they will start to lose a little in manufacturing sectors due to the increased competition. In Asia, we have exactly the reverse position. And if on the left you see that you have average gain, if you look at what's happened just in agriculture, you are going to see more or strong losses in Asia, but morely all Asian countries are going to lose in terms of unskilled wages in agriculture, but on the overall they gain because the manufacturing sector expand. And the stronger losses are in Japan and Korea, and you see we are up to 7%, because they will give a lot in soya, in corn, or even in meat, and it has consequences. And my last thing is just to know where the FDI are going. But basically, the model says that we are not going to see FDI from Latin America to Asia. We are going to see huge flows of, significant flows from Asia to Latin America, where, for example, overall total stock of FDI from all origin in Brazil can go up by 20% just with this increased flow from Asia. And in this graph, you see that if you just have the developing FTA with the developing bilateral investment treaty, there is no effect. It means what? It means what will be important if Japan and South Korea decide to use their money to invest in these countries, for example, to re-import or at least to work to bring agri-food products in their home countries. I'm going to stop here.